So thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon for our lunchtime talk with Mark Clare. Mark will be delivering a talk on his artistic practice and particularly his works Eidolons and the unavoidable interconnectedness of everything remediate, both of which are currently on show at Luan Gallery as part of the group exhibition Athrú and Invocation, which is running until the 3rd of September. So today's event marks the first of a series of events for the Luan Gallery Climate Outreach Programme, which is kindly supported by Creative Westmeath. And this programme forms part of phase 1 of Luan Gallery's 3-year strategy focusing on climate change, Irish ecology, biodiversity and sustainability. And this project aims to instigate meaningful engagement between artists, artworks and the public in our county and on a national basis, or level rather. So this is the first year of our climate outreach programme, and we have planned climate change in the arts talks, sustainable arts practice workshops for children and adults, which focus on ecologically friendly artistic practices, and artist-led talks such as the one we have today. So if you're interested in knowing more about these events, you can contact Luan Gallery through the webpage, our email or our social media channels. So I'll just give a little bit of an introduction to Mark, and I won't say too much because I'm sure he'll speak to himself a lot better than I can. But Mark Clare's research-led practice employs a variety of media, including sculpture, video, animation, sound, performance, and photography. And in his recent work, he examines to what extent human activities have had a significant impact on the Earth's ecosystems. He is interested in the potential of science, philosophy, and aesthetics to explore issues such as climate change and global policies to produce work that keeps our attention focused to what's going on in our environment. So a really, really important artist, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many, many others. So thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you very much. It's very generous. And thank you everyone for joining myself and Aoife this afternoon. And really, actually, I wanted to start today just to acknowledge the incredibly sad loss of Sinead O'Connor yesterday, because when I was starting my foundation course, The Lion and the Cobra had just been released and it was to critical acclaim. And it had an incredible influence on myself and my peers at that time, and has continued to do so for many younger generations. And I just think it was an incredibly sad loss, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. So a little bit of background information about myself is I graduated from Central St. Martin's College in London in 1992 with a degree in fine art sculpture. And then basically for the next 10 years, I developed a practice around drawing. And the main reason for that was, well, 2 reasons. One was I could do it in my bedroom, and 2, I was moving around a lot and it was the easiest way of working. So I started off developing a practice based out of small sketchbooks, and by the end of it I was producing these very large scale drawings, and around 2002 I felt that I'd come to the end of that process of working, and I decided to go back and do an MFA. And I went and I studied in the University of Ulster and did the MFA up there in Belfast. And yeah, I guess I've been developing a practice since then. It would have been very much looking at social and political situations, and in more recent times I've started to move into looking at the human-induced impact of climate change and ecological issues. And as Aoife said, I have 2 pieces in the show at the moment. One is Eidolons, and the other one is the unavoidable interconnectedness of everything remediate. And I'm going to start with the unavoidable interconnectedness because the Genesis story is more convoluted for that one. So I'm also going to apologize for all the technical issues that are about to unfold, but we'll give it a go. And hopefully this will work. So in 2019, I was participating on a residency program called The Urgent Inquiry. And this was a 3-month art and biodiversity residency where I was based in Wexford. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to explore the impact of climate change on the local biodiversity and habitat loss on biodiversity through conversations with environmental specialists, local scientists, and local community groups. And through these conversations, I learned about 𝘼𝘃𝙗𝙪𝙼𝙪, which is a solitary bee found in Ireland. And it is one of 77 solitary bees found in Ireland. And solitary bees pollinate more flowers than any other group of insects or birds. And they're incredibly important for healthy ecosystems. And one of the outcomes of that project was this piece here called Missing. And it was this like public intervention where, with the help of Wexford County Council, we put up posters on all the blue and flag beaches across County Wexford. And on the poster, it talks about 𝘼𝘃𝙗𝙪𝙼𝙪 and the benefits that it brings to the local ecosystem. 𝘼𝘃𝙗𝙗𝙪𝙼 is only found along the east coast of Ireland, and it is the only snail, or the only bee that makes her nest in empty snail shells. And at the moment, 𝘼𝘃𝙗𝙗𝙪𝙼 is considered near threatened in Ireland, and which means that it needs to be monitored because it has the potential to move quickly into an extinction category. And the main reason is habitat loss. It only lives along the coastline in Ireland, and obviously we're losing a lot of coastline due to building and to the collapse of the coastline. So yeah, insects are the main contributors to biodiversity globally. And at the same time that I was doing that project, the United Nations came out with a report that highlighted that up to 1 million species were in danger of extinction. And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, like, how do you visualize such a large-scale catastrophe? So I came up with this idea to produce a piece of work called The Unavoidable Interconnectedness of Everything Part 2. And the idea behind this piece was to invite individuals to come along to workshops and produce 1 million individual handmade ceramic shells. And each shell would represent one of the species listed on the United Nations report. And that when these combined would make a artwork that could visually physically represent this large-scale catastrophe. So two components to the idea behind it was, one, I wanted people to use an organic material like clay, which means that literally they would get their hands dirty, and I felt that this would create a visceral response to it. And it was also about the idea that cooperation, working together at this scale to highlight the issues that we are facing, highlights our ability to change, and if we want to have a sustainable future. So as part of Urgent Inquiry, I started the first Missing workshop. And again, what we did was I worked with a local artist, a local ceramics artist by the name of 𝘼𝘃𝙗𝙗𝙪𝙼. And we put together this workshop, inviting people to come along and develop this piece of work. I'm going to jump down here to some images. So we put together a workshop that included getting people to draw and imagine these snail shells and how you might produce them. Over there on the left, you can see 𝘼𝘃𝙗𝙗𝙪𝙼. And then basically we gave out 3 balls of clay to everybody, and we invited them to produce some pieces of work. And the idea being that at the end of the workshop, we would hold on to one of these snail shells and they would collect 2 snail shells. And it was a very well attended workshop. It was pretty successful. And I ran it in a number of different places. I ran it actually in one school, at the whole school. Every classroom took part in Rathfarnham. And overall, I think we had around between 350 to 400 people participate in the workshop. And I was kind of, look, we got some really beautiful pieces, actually, really incredible work. And I was kind of considering how to continue with this project, how to maintain this project. Obviously, I was, even before it started, I was considering the environmental impact that this piece would have. If we actually completed the project by producing 1 million pieces and having to fire 1 million pieces of glazed ceramic, the energy output that would take. And I kind of put the project on hold slightly, and I thought about how can I represent it? And this is one way that I've chosen to represent it, is through my website. So you can click on the website, and what you can see is a grid that it only has 100, but it has up to 100 different individual shells. And you can click on this and you can go through and see all these different shells that people have made. And then also added to that are links to 3D animations that I produced. And I'll talk to this a little bit more in a minute, but I just want to go back. They also, I linked them to individual species that are on the United Nations list that are in danger of extinction. So I was trying to keep this like circular motion moving with the piece of work. At the point that I was making this, I started a residency in UCD, where I was the artist in residence with the Earth Institute in UCD. And the Earth Institute is a group of people who are interested in thinking and talking about and adding to the conversation around how do we develop a sustainable future. And it's a voluntary aspect. Everyone there is doing it for their own reasons, their own interest and their own joy. And it was an incredibly rich residency where I got to meet and listen to some really, really interesting people. And one of those people was a lady who worked in the agriculture department. And chatting to her, she was telling me that they have a three-dimensional scanning machine that they use to scan plant roots, as well as many other different components. And she gave me access to her scanning machine, which I used then to produce these 3D animations that I was showing earlier. So yeah, so that's the start of the unavoidable interconnectedness of everything. Sorry. Just and then this was it last summer. Yeah, last summer I was on residency at the 𝘼𝙗𝙃 Sculpture Centre. And this piece here is the unavoidable interconnectedness of everything, part 3, in flux. And in this piece, I've employed eco-engineering solutions to produce these standalone sculptures that attempt to act as functional structures for both terrestrial and coastal adaptation. And what you can see them standing, these three-dimensional pieces standing here. And a central to their design is their topographic complexity and adaptability to act as incubation units for biodiversity. So you have these concrete pieces. And the idea with these concrete pieces is that these could be used in a variety of situations, like attached to the facades of buildings or to coastal defense or renewable energy structures, and that they would be more inviting to a variety of different biodiversity to live on these kind of structures. And what you see here is one of the 3D models that were produced, topographic models that are used using 3D printing. And it is these models that then produce the concrete casts. So these sculptural pieces are the kind of anchor for this installation, and I call it an incomplete installation. But the animation, there's an animation that, again, using the animations that I had produced with the scanner and other 3D modeling programs, I produced this animation that the idea is meant to be, it's supposed to be ambiguous to scale. I'll play some clips here. And these are not exact in their timeline sequence, but the idea is that you're moving through these different environments, these different landscapes, and it's uncertain if it's subterranean or cosmic, and that it could be in between these two things. And the soundtrack, some of the soundtrack used in it is recordings from wind blowing over the Ross ice shelf, which is the largest ice shelf in Antarctica and is currently melting rapidly and affecting the ocean currents negatively. So also the one down here on the right, what you see is this kind of it's sort of an animation of a representation of a 100-year-old Sitka spruce tree that is found on Campbell Island, which is 200 kilometers off the coast of New Zealand. And this Sitka spruce tree, which is an invasive species, which was actually planted by the Governor General of New Zealand, who actually was the Earl Ranfurly from County Tyrone. But this tree, when it was tested, was found to have traces of radioactivity from the nuclear testing that was done in and around that area back in the 50s. And it's considered what they call a golden marker, which could be a possible sign of what is called the Anthropocene. And it's actually one of what is considered 12 golden markers. So that's the next progression of that piece. And then what we get to see in Luan, I'll just go in here, is the unavoidable interconnectedness of everything remediate. And what you see here is the same installation. Over here on the back wall, you have the black 3D printed model, and you have some concrete pieces down here at the front. But I also used those 3D printed pieces to produce molds to create mycelium tiles, because I wanted to move away from the concrete, and I wanted to move into trying to produce something that has a living aspect to it. So I started casting these pieces with mycelium. These are just some close-ups. So there's these different steps along the way to producing this piece of work that, as I said, I call it an incomplete installation, because I think this just going to keep moving forward in different ways, different outcomes, different iterations. That's just some stills. Okay, yeah. So the second piece I have in the exhibition is called Eidolons, and this was produced in 2022, which was the centenary of the founding of the Irish Republic. And through my research around 𝘼𝘃�̲𝙪 I got to meet the head curator of entomology at the Natural History Museum, and I worked with Dr. Aidan O'Hanlon on a number of different projects. And Aidan was telling me that 30% of the insect population in Ireland has gone extinct. But he said that's a skewed number, because actually only 8% of insect species have been researched in Ireland. And again, from having a conversation with Aidan, he told me that a species is only considered extinct after 100 years of not being documented again. So it gets documented, and if it's not documented again after 100 years, then it's considered regionally extinct. There was a lot of conversations going on then, obviously, around the founding of the Republic and lots of celebrations around the centenary. And I was kind of interested in this idea of highlighting another aspect of the history of the Republic. So in those 100 years, we've lost 26 species of insects. And that includes 8 species of water beetles, 14 species of macro moths, and 1 species of butterfly. And I was kind of like wondering, how can I produce a piece of work around this? And I went in and I documented all these different species in the Natural History Museum collection. And then I was, that just wasn't working for me. So I came to this AI program. And what I did was I produced these drawings of these species using an AI program, and by feeding information and images and different kinds of things into the program. But what you see are drawings that are not anatomically correct. And the idea for me is that as we move forward, these species are going to be lost to the collective memory of the nation. So I use this AI program to produce these drawings at the time. And I'll play a little clip, actually. I hope. Yeah. So, as I was making the piece of work, the war in Ukraine started, and I was very, I became very aware how reliant Europe and Ireland was on Russia for energy source. At the time I was in Berlin, and we have a green provider. We had a green energy provider. So when I was making the piece, I was using green energy. And I decided that I wanted to try and present this work through a system that would, a renewable system. And what you see here and what you see in the exhibition is a low energy monitor that is connected to a power bank. So that's what runs the piece for the whole day long. And then that's recharged. And originally what I had done, and I still have, is this system where I have a portable solar panel that connects to a power bank that then can recharge these units. But unfortunately, Ireland being Ireland, I have not been able to completely get this system to work. But that's an ongoing project to try and work out how I can produce and present these pieces of work through renewable energies. And what I also did, because one time that I did try to do that form of presentation where we just use the solar panel to recharge, and we knew that would never work constantly, but we were prepared to give it a go. And what I did was I printed a image of each one of the 26 species that you see in the video, that would allow people to spend a bit of time looking at. And also, if the monitor wasn't up and running because it didn't have any energy, this was the backup plan. So you also see this now in the gallery in Luan. I'm trying to think of something else. Yeah, I guess what I want to say is all of these projects come about through, I guess, a lot of research and a lot of collaboration. To produce this piece of work, I worked with the UCD Innovation Centre with William Davis. I worked with the Earth Institute. I also worked with 3 electrical engineering students to help me come up with this system of solar panels and power banks and et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, all of them are, I consider, very collaborative in their production. The same with the other piece, the unavoidable connectedness. I worked with the School of Engineering to produce those pieces, and the School of Agriculture as well to produce the animation. So yeah, okay, I think I'm going to stop there, stop sharing my screen, and maybe we can have a chat then if people want to ask me questions. How does that sound?
That was fantastic, Mark. Thank you so much.
Okay, great.
Lovely. Yes, and maybe share screen. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, you can type them into the group chat, or pop. You can raise your hand using the raise hand function, and I'll unmute, and you can ask your question. Okay, Fiona.
Hello, how's it going? I can turn on my camera or not. That was absolutely brilliant. I'm a huge fan of your work. Really loved your work. I don't really have a question, but I just really wanted to congratulate your use of materials and making work in an ecological crisis. I think your work is really important to echo the introduction. And I like that you're highlighting that Ireland doesn't have the green energy sources, and that you're using things in that way. So your work is about the environment, but not, it's not didactic, or it's not, it's not going in the bin afterwards. A lot of artists are making work and then it's going in a skip. So I just wanted to ask how you feel about making objects in this time of ecological production. I know you are, or ecological crisis, I know you are. I'll stop talking now, sorry.
Yeah, listen, it's a great question, and it's really difficult. I'm finding it more and more difficult, to be honest with you. I'm constantly thinking about how can I make a sustainable practice, and as are the other artists that are in that exhibition that I'm lucky to be in, and it's becoming more and more considered all the time. Like, how can I make something that doesn't have a huge impact and can speak to these things, and I guess speak to what it is to be a contemporary artist in this day,
Yeah, it's just a question that comes up. I just wanted to hear your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been, like I said, probably for about the last 7 years, I've been thinking about this stuff and getting, like, Rosie O'Reilly, who's here with us for the chat and is also in the exhibition. Rosie and I did the same residency in UCD. So, I've been fortunate enough to have conversation with other artists who are very much on a similar wavelength. And that really, really is helpful. Like, it's supportive to know there are other people thinking and talking that way. And just for bouncing ideas and, that's, again, I think as artists, you're always kind of reliant on peers to help you get through, and because it's such you're often isolated. You're in a studio trying to make something happen. Even, like I say, these are collaborative projects. They wouldn't happen without 20 other people. but there's still that kind of sitting in the space, trying to work out how these, so, you know, having a peer group to bounce ideas off is super important, I think.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. I'm really looking forward to seeing the exhibition on Tuesday.
Your question.
Thanks.
Great, thanks so much, Fiona. I'll just read out Beatrice O'Connell's comment. Fantastic work, Mark. Love your commitment to sustainable materials and green energy. Particularly interested in moths myself, the peppered moth as an indicator of the beginning of the Anthropocene. Would that mark be a golden marker?
Not that I've read, but
Okay.
that's not to say it isn't, you know, I mean, it's constantly changing this stuff. So
yeah,
I'd be interested to hear more about that.
Yeah, Beatrice, please do let us know. I think that I haven't heard that term myself, the golden markers of the Anthropocene, and I think it's really fascinating, something I'm definitely going to get stuck into researching now myself.
It's also called the golden spike, so it kind of flips.
Okay.
I think in the 𝘼𝘃cije 𝘰𝗍𝘃𝗰 in Berlin have been looking at this whole thing for probably nearly 10 years now. And they have an interesting project on their website about these 12 different sites that are now considered these golden spike, golden marker locations.
Yeah, that's really fascinating and kind of really important to have these kind of totems of change really like paid heed to and given attention, and even just having a term applied to them really like marks their significance too.
Yeah. It's like, I guess, naming things in some way.
Right, exactly. And I'm always brought back to that Ursula Le Guin short story. She unnames them, which if people are not familiar with, it's a very short story by Ursula Le Guin about an alternative origin story to Eve, where Eve unnames all of the animals and creatures and then eventually herself, and in doing so releases them from the patriarchal control from which they were originally held under. And kind of seeking away from that then, or following on from that, I think that a lot of the activism that is being done and continues to need to be done these days, whether it be in the arts or political or social activism, is very much unnaming practices and behaviors and ways of thinking and ideologies, and taking it away from that really capital focused patriarchal kind of structure that really has kind of, excuse my language, but effed our earth. And just thinking about how your practice is so collaborative, and that really is a tonic against the pervasive individualism that seeks to separate us, because really it's the collectivity that is the only way. It's through collectivity that we can only really fight against these forces.
Absolutely, yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, it's language is such a funny thing. I've recently been reading David Abrams. I don't know if anyone knows The Sensuous Word, I think it's called. Anyway, but again, he's talking about how when language started, it was hieroglyphic and it was relating to the environment that we lived in. And it was about drawing images of these things that we lived with every day. And then slowly but surely, it became this thing that it became words, and those words took us away from the environment that we lived in. And now we're back kind of renaming things for that very reason, to try and, you know, get away from, I guess, well, you know, the notion of capitalism, which has got us to where we are now. So, you know, again, it's super complex, really interesting, lots of stuff to think about and delve into, you know.
Absolutely. And I'm going to ask you to link me to that after this talk. You may share it actually on the Instagram story of Luan Gallery, because I think that when it comes to language and our experience of the world and how we interpret the world, it's really, 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 it's our entry point into the world, really, isn't it? Or at least we like to think that it is. Really, the entry point is our sense and the visual senses, which is where arts come in as a kind of pre-linguistic way of communicating our experience of the world.
I mean, David Abrams also talks about how as a baby, everything you do is sensual. It's like, you know, you're touching the ground with all fours. You know what I mean? You don't have language. You're touching all the objects that are around you to get a sense of who you are within the world. So, you know, like I say, it's kind of interesting that language starts to take us out of that sensual interaction with our environment, you know?
Absolutely. It seems like a kind of slow, steady dissociation that we don't realize until, maybe some of us might come to the point of realization when we do start looking into things like that and reading things like that. But that's certainly for myself, the biggest goal of visual arts, and if not, maybe goal isn't the right term, but the biggest reason for visual arts. What more could you want as a reason than to just be able to speak in ways that language completely fails us?
Absolutely. Yeah. I totally agree. And again, it's a struggle as well, because we're so orientated around language to then, but also I guess it's the freedom, isn't it? That's what art is. It gives you that freedom to step outside of that way of thinking and engaging. And it is much more about being sensual.
Absolutely. And to engage the senses, which is why I think that particularly visual arts exhibitions and visual art works are really important in communicating really urgent messages. Hence the exhibition in Luan at the moment. There's so much language around the climate catastrophe and the Anthropocene, and we're constantly bombarded with headlines. And I think that people haven't engaged with the climate catastrophe on a tangible level. And I think I think that in certain countries, such as Ireland, we haven't engaged with the climate catastrophe on a tangible level. Certainly many people have felt its effects in a very real, visceral way. But for people who live in Ireland or elsewhere where they haven't felt those things, I think that visual arts can be very successful then in kind of conveying that experience or conveying a message that needs to be told.
Yeah, absolutely. A little pushback, and that would be, I'm very aware as well that even my education was framed within conceptual art and the notion of institutions and white cubes and things like that. And it's, again, I think, trying to find a balance where the conversation can happen in all these different environments, I think that's really important. And I absolutely, again, for a long time, particularly as I was growing up, the notion of climate change was invisible to most of us, whereas that's so not the case, as we're seeing right now at the moment. And yes, Ireland is probably one of the safest and least impacted countries. But again, it's super complex because agriculture is such a major component of what we do in this country. And it's, it's adding to our CO2 emissions dramatically. So, these are really complex issues, obviously. But I think, what's happening in Europe and America and China right now, just sort of like we have no choice but to really sit up and pay attention now.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you did say that about, it's a very complex thing in the sense that I would say there's a level of sanitation when it comes to presenting work like that within an institutional context. Like certainly a high level of sanitation. And I'm wondering, I'm always one for cross-institutional and cross-disciplinary collaborations and having other people come in and inform us or inform myself in what's the best way to engage. And I'm wondering for yourself, do you see that happening with institutions or other practitioners down the line, or are you currently in the process of that at the moment?
I mean, I think people have been engaging with that kind of thing probably from the 60s, you know what I mean? But it's having a rebirth or a renewal or whatever you want to call it. As I said, nothing I do happens in isolation. There's the knowledge of so many different people lay the foundation for, my jumping off points. The residency that I did in the Earth Institute has just been an ongoing kind of fountain of information and knowledge and access to people with far more understanding of the issues than I do, and again, it's that kind of what's the word, interdisciplinary way of working that I think we all have to just embrace now in every job, in every institution, in everything that we're doing, really, And I think people are much more aware of that, right? We can't not be. We've got, the World Wide Web. Just, it allows you to access things. They might not always be right, but it allows you to access things.
Absolutely, yeah. I've definitely seen a level of interest peaked in kind of cross-disciplinary skill building and just people becoming more interested in things outside of their field, which is really lovely.
Yeah.
And really, really, really important too. As opposed to people being kind of just hedged in and kind of tunnel vision.
It's been adapted or implemented in educational institutions as well, which is really important. This notion now of interdisciplinary action and education and whatever. So, that's very hopeful as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just got a flashback to my own educational experience where the politics were so divisive amongst departments that you couldn't even go to one department to use their equipment. Yeah, unfortunately, humans are humans at the end of the day, and they do act.
Unfortunately, humans are overworked in a lot of these places. You know what I mean? Like, but it's kind of ridiculous, and it has to change. But
yeah, step by step.
Yeah, exactly.
Does anybody have any questions for the final few minutes? No.
Have I ever chatted to farmers? I guess in Wexford I got a little bit more of that, a little bit closer to it, but probably not. In fact, the farmers that I got to meet were people who were actually really interested in this area and were very well informed around biodiversity. In fact, one gentleman I spoke to is a farmer in Tipperary, and his passion for bees and orchids was just mesmerizing. And it was he's like one of the few amateurs in this country who actually is regularly, I can't remember his name, but he's regularly quoted in a lot of the science documentation around species within Ireland and find. So in answer, not really. I haven't spoken to too many farmers. I think it would be very interesting and very delicate.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I find that having grown up in a sugar.
Owen Dalton, no, I haven't. I don't know which. Do you know the name of the book? Type it in there, maybe.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hiya. The name of the book is The Wild Atlantic Rainforest.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's talking about rewilding.
Okay.
And I think he comes from a sculpture background himself.
Okay, cool.
And he's regularly quoted in the papers. I think he writes a regular column for the Irish Times.
Okay, I'll definitely check it out. Thank you for that.
Sure. Thank you.
Have we lost Aoife? There we go. I was like, should we wrap it up?
Yeah, Irish goodbye. I just dodge off.
Absolutely, yeah.
No, I'm using a very dodgy webcam cable, and I haven't used a webcam in about 15 years, but here we are. I forgot my laptop today. But yeah, unless anybody has a last question. And Owen Dalton, I must look that up. It sounds really interesting.
Thank you, Helen. Just in that, the Irish goodbye, I remember the first time I heard that was, it was actually a Polish person who said it to me, who then told me that it was a Polish goodbye. So obviously there's many nations that just disappear.
Interesting. And I think it's such a bizarre, totally off tangent here, it's such a bizarre phrase because the Irish goodbye for me anyway in my social circle never existed. It was the Irish stay until the last drink and then insist on an after party.
Like looking around and going, what happened?
Yeah, like, where is everybody? So certainly wouldn't be me. But yeah, on that note, thank you so much, Mark. That was absolutely fantastic.
Right.
And I would urge everybody to come down to Luan and see Mark's
Absolutely.
work in
Absolutely.
person. It's an absolutely fantastic exhibition, if I do say so myself. But the work is brilliant, Mark. And Rosie,
And the other artist's work is beautiful as well. And it's
Absolutely.
for that reason alone as well worth having a look.
absolutely. So there's Mark, Clare, Teresa, Dillon, and Rosie O'Reilly exhibiting work in Athrú and Invocation, and it runs until the 3rd of September at Luan Gallery. So, thank you, Beatrice, for linking that into the group chat. Brilliant. We'll have a look at that. So, on that note, thank you everybody so much. And again, thank you, Mark, for your chat. It was really lovely to hear you speak today.
Thanks very much for everyone for coming along.
Thanks now. Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.